Good afternoon, everyone. Bienvenue. Welcome to our annual information meeting. My name is Kathy Greenbank, and I'm Chair of the Board of Trustees and the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan. We're very pleased to be here today, and we thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day to attend. Before we continue, it is important that we acknowledge the land on which we gather. Although this is a virtual presentation, we, our board, and our presenters are in Fredericton, New Brunswick today. The land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik, Maliseet, and Mi'kmaq. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. I have a few housekeeping items for you today. Presentations will be delivered in English and French with simultaneous translation available in both languages. For those of you joining us online, you have the option to select your language of choice as indicated on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Closed captioning is provided for those joining us online. You have the option to turn it on by selecting your language of choice and clicking Join. To turn it off, simply click Stop. We encourage you to submit any questions you have for the Board of Trustees or the presenters at any time during the meeting by clicking on the Submit a Question icon. We will answer as many as we can during the question and answer session. And finally, a recording of today's webcast will be available on the plan's website in coming days. Our Board of Trustees is composed of the following individuals. In addition to me, there are 8 others who have been appointed to the board as trustees. Ross Galbraith, Vice Chair of the Board and an international representative for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Sébastien Deschênes, Vice President of the Edmundston campus of Université de Moncton and Professor of Accounting. Marc Godat, Chair of the Audit Committee and a retired Assistant Deputy Minister with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. Marilyn Quinn, Chair of the Governance Committee, past Board Chair of the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan for 5 years, a retired registered nurse, and past President of the New Brunswick Nurses Union. Susie Prudeg, President of the New Brunswick Union of Public and Private Employees. Odette Robichaud, retired court stenographer and past President of the CUPE Local 1840 and past CUPE Regional Vice President. Paula Doucette, President of the New Brunswick Nurses Union, and Jim Meehan, Deputy Minister with the Department of Social Development. We also have 2 observers on the board, Lee Spragg, Executive Director of the New Brunswick Union, and Bill Murray, Facilities Supervisor with the New Brunswick Community College. As for myself, I'm a retired professional accountant and have been a trustee on the board since 2017. I was a member of the Governance Committee for 5 years and chaired that committee for 2. The composition of the board has undergone a number of changes since the last annual information meeting. I want to take a moment to recognize Leonard Lee White, whose term ended on January 31st of this year. Leonard had been a trustee of the board since conversion of the plan and served as chair from late 2019 until the end of his term. His knowledge and experience was instrumental to the continued success of the plan, and we thank him for his contributions. Your board members have diverse backgrounds, which strengthens the board and its decision-making. Each of us has been appointed to the board by either the provincial government or one of the following unions: the New Brunswick Nurses Union, the New Brunswick Union, Local 37 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Locals 1252, 1840, and 5017. Many of us are also members of the plan. We have a fiduciary duty to the NBPSPP and must act in the best interest of the plan and its members when administering the affairs of the plan. Failure to do so can result in disciplinary actions or revocation of our appointment. I would like to introduce today's presenters. Yves Plourde, an actuary and partner with the plan's independent actuarial firm LifeWorks. Yves will provide us with details relating to the plan's most recent actuarial valuation report. And John Sinclair, President and CEO of Vescor Inc., the plan's investment manager and administration services provider. John will provide us with an overview of the outcomes from the investment management and administrative services provided to the plan in 2021, and he will give us a year-to-date update. Since the conversion to the NBPSPP in 2014, we continue to focus on ensuring the plan remains secure, sustainable, and affordable. Indicators of the plan's success include the ability to fund inflation every year since the plan was created, while remaining in a surplus. This is a clear demonstration that the stable, lower-risk investment strategies required by the plan have led to positive outcomes. This low-risk approach that focuses on slower, steady growth means that when markets are strong, we may not see returns that are as high as some other pension plans with riskier portfolios. This is balanced by the fact that when the financial markets are in a downturn, the plan may still have negative returns, but they are less significant than the losses of the average Canadian pension plan. When looking at the longer term, the investment strategy of the plan compares very favorably with other pension plans. Real-world examples of this low-risk approach in action will be provided by our presenters today. As many of you know, we are currently facing a challenging period in financial markets. In this tumultuous market environment, the plan's investment program is performing as designed, and the plan remains in a surplus. Today, our plan is comprised of nearly 42,000 members residing in New Brunswick and throughout the world. As a member, you should have received a survey from us earlier this year. We launched the survey to determine how you perceive your plan, what information you would like to receive, and more. I would like to take a moment on behalf of the board to thank you all who took the time to complete this survey. We received nearly 6,000 responses, representing over 14% of the members. The level of response given allows us to consider the survey as statistically significant, meaning it is representative of all members. We are currently reviewing your responses and will use them to guide our decision-making going forward. There are several key providers that we as a board engage to support us in meeting the requirements of the plan, keeping your pension plan secure, affordable, and sustainable. LifeWorks is our plan's actuary, responsible for providing the annual actuarial valuation. KPMG is responsible for the audit of the plan's financial statements. Vescor Inc. is the plan's administration and investment service provider. Vescor oversees the daily management of your plan at the board's discretion. The firm of Pink Larkin provides legal representation and advice for the plan and the board. We also engage other external service providers to support our board and the plan on an as-needed basis. We will now move on to our first presentation. The Actuarial Valuation Report, which is prepared annually, is an important tool used by the Board of Trustees to assess the health of the plan through the analysis of its current funding status. It enables the board to make decisions on granting the annual cost of living adjustment or any other future benefit changes. Yves Plourde, partner with LifeWorks, will present the 2021 actuarial valuation results. Welcome, Yves.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned my name, Yves Plourde. I am the actuary at LifeWorks. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you to walk you through the results of the most recent actuarial evaluation of the New Brunswick Public Service Pension Plan in New Brunswick, dated January 1st, 2022. I will start with a short summary of the membership in the plan review, the evolution of the assets and the plan liabilities over the years, and discuss the resulting financial position not only for January 1st, 2020, but through the recent past, and show how the plan's financial position is currently affected by the underperformance of markets so far in 2022. I will then review the risk management test results that we track annually, and finally provide information on inflation and put in perspective the cost of living adjustment that was awarded by the trustees for January 1st, 2023. Let's start by the plan's membership. The number of active members has stabilized over the last few years at just under 19,000. The number of retirees is consistently growing as the later cohort of baby boomers is retiring, for a total of over 17,800 retirees January 1st, 2022. On the asset side, the pension fund has increased significantly over the past few years from $6 billion in 2014 to over $9.37 billion as of January 1st, 2022. The year 2021 was particularly good from investment perspective, with an investment return of 9.23%. John will provide more information on the performance in his remarks later. Now, in order to be able to determine the financial position of the plan, we need to compare the assets of the plan to its liability. The plan's liability is a representation of how much money we believe should be in the fund at the time of the evaluation in order to pay all the benefits that members have accrued up to the date of valuation. In order to calculate the liability, we need to make many assumptions about the future. One of those assumptions is the discount rate that we use of 4.5% per annum. This is a very conservative assumption of expected investment returns for the future. We actually believe that the fund can be expected to earn over the long term about 6.3% per annum. Using such a conservative discount rate provides us with the expectation that more often than not, plan investments should generate extra funds compared to our discount rate assumption. This was the case for the period 2014 to 2021, and this conservatism will continue to assist in generating future surplus in the plan. As you can see, The plan's liability went from just under $6 billion in 2014 to about $7.8 billion on January 1st, 2022. You will notice that the assets of the plan increased faster than the plan liability over that period. This is partly due to the fact that we use a conservative discount rate in the calculation of the liability. To finally determine the financial position of the plan, the trustees add to the assets the amount of contributions made to the plan in excess of the cost of the accruing benefits over the next 15 years. On January 1st, 2022, those excess contributions for the 15 years following the evaluation date represents an amount of $1.2 billion, which, when added to the assets, represents total adjusted assets of over $10.5 billion. When you divide these assets by the liability, you obtain a funded ratio called the open group funded ratio. As you can see in this graphic, this ratio has remained well over 100% over the recent past, which means that we believe there is enough assets in the plan, including excess contributions to be received, to provide for all the benefits payable for the lifetime of active members and retirees. The funded ratio has in fact increased from 121.5 level in 2014 to 131.7% on January 1st, 2020, which is just before the start of the COVID pandemic. As a result of the uncertainty created by the start of the pandemic in March 2020, the financial markets retreated in an unprecedented manner, hitting a low of about at the end of March 2020, which reduced the funded ratio for the plan to about 122.8% at March 31st, 2020. However, the markets rebounded almost as quickly as they had come down, and by January 1st, 2021, the funded ratio has returned to a level in excess of 130% at about 130.4%. Given the good investment performance of 2021, the funded ratio for the plan increased from 134.4% on January 1st, 2021 to 134.8% at January 1st, 2022. As you can see, as this time going by, your pension benefits have become more secure as the funded ratio accumulated a bigger buffer above 100%. You could say that the plan has been getting ready over the past 8 years to face whatever risks may lie ahead by accumulating a larger buffer over 100%. This conservatism served us well at the beginning of the pandemic with the initial negative reaction of from the markets. As you are all aware, the year 2022 has so far also been a very unsettled period for markets. We continue to have a pandemic still causing major disruptions in some parts of the world. We have serious disruptions to supply chains, oil and energy prices in general at very elevated levels, and to complicate matters, an invasion of Ukraine by Russia. All of this is causing inflation levels that we have not seen in decades. All this uncertainty leads to investment returns for the first 6 months of the year 2022 that are actually negative at about -8%. As mentioned before, the plan has been basically preparing itself in the last 8 years to face this market turndown. As a result of this negative return in 2022, we estimate that the funded ratio of the plan has dropped to about 123.7% on June 30th, 2022. With an inflation rate that is still not under control, we are not yet out of that volatility for some time. Nonetheless, I sincerely hope that the June 30th ratio represents a low point and that we will see improvements going forward. In any case, you can rest assured that your plan still has a funded ratio with significant buffer above 100% and therefore is ready to face the market volatility that may lie ahead. Let us now look at certain risk management tests conducted annually. The first risk management test involves calculating the probability that base benefits under the plan will not have to be reduced over the next 20 years. On that basis, the plan scores 99.4%, which means that in more than 99.4% of the studied cases, the base benefits payable to the plan from the plan remain intact. This score exceeds the minimum of 97.5% mandated by pension law and gives us comfort in knowing that the security of the base benefits is very high. Because the plan meets this test, it can continue to provide a cost of living adjustment to all members and retirees. You can also get some reassurance with the fact that the province is guaranteeing that it will protect benefit levels that exist as of December 31st, 2013. This means that in the likely event of trustees would have to reduce benefits under the plan, the province will ensure that you never get less than the benefits you were receiving or had accrued at December 31st, 2013. The second risk management test involves the calculation of the average cost of living increases that can be expected to be provided under the plan over the next 20 years. This calculation results in expected average cost of living adjustments of 94.8% of inflation over the next 20 years. The result of this second test is also very positive and indicates a high likelihood that cost of living adjustments are going to continue. This brings me to the topic of inflation and cost of living adjustment. Over the last 18 months or so, inflation has been a hot topic of discussion given that it has reached levels not seen in many decades. Inflation is measured by the increase of the Consumer Price Index as reported by Stat Canada every month. For the 12-month period ending June 30th, 2022, so taking into account the period from July 2021 to June 2022, the average increase in the Consumer Price Index, or inflation in Canada, was 5.56%. We have not seen an average annual inflation of that magnitude since the beginning of the 80s. Given the healthy financial position of the plan at the beginning of 2022, the trustees were able to provide a COLA of 5.24% effective January 1st, 2023. This increase is provided at a cost for the plan of $389.2 million. It is an exceptional achievement by the plan to be able to in a position to provide a COLA of this magnitude. As the table shows, the plan has been able to provide COLA over the years that equals inflation for every year since January 1st of 2015. This year, it is the only year so far in which COLA is not equal to inflation. A COLA of 5.24% represents 94% of inflation for this year. But if you average the last 9 years, COLA has covered 98% of the inflation. An inflation of 5.56% is not normal for developed economies. And we certainly hope that the Bank of Canada, along with the Federal Reserve in the U.S. and other central banks around the world, will continue to fight against inflation until such time as it is restored to a more normal level. The ability of the plan to provide COLA of 5.24% is evidence that it is very well funded. Otherwise, it would not have been able to do it. When inflation spikes higher, such as now, it is normal to not be able to provide COLA equal to full inflation because the plan only spends a portion of its surplus towards the COLA in order to ensure that it protects your base pension. Rest assured that there's still enough surplus in the plan, left in the plan, to continue to protect appropriately your base pension. Given the market downturn of the first part of this year, 2022, it is unlikely that a COLA of the magnitude granted this year can be repeated every year. You can expect to continue to receive COLA in future years, albeit at likely lower levels than this year, unless markets unexpectedly turn around. Many plans do not offer inflation protection, and those who offer it very often have caps which limit the amount that those plans will be able to provide this year. It is the case for the majority of public pension plans in Canada. To ensure that those who will receive the best protection against inflation with the COLA clause. A characteristic interesting of your plan is that if a COLA is below the inflation for one or several years, as it is the case this year, the portion that was not provided, such as the amount of 0.32% that was not granted for this year, remains available to be granted in a future year. I want to reiterate that it is normal that during times when we have a spike in inflation, that your plan only provides a portion of that spike as cost of living allowance so as to protect your base pension. As inflation will come down and markets return to more normal state, you can expect that the plan will be able to provide COLA in excess of inflation in order to catch up for the years in which your COLA did match full inflation. This process is not a sign of weak funding or underfunding because your plan is very well funded. It is actually the sign of a well-managed pension plan. I certainly hope that you found the information provided interesting and useful, and that it provided you with a better understanding of how resilient your plan is in face of adversity. I thank you for your attention, and I will remain available for the question period. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve, for your presentation. We are pleased with the plan's performance and how it has continued to weather volatile markets during the pandemic and this current inflationary period. As noted by Eve, a cost of living adjustment of 5.24% will be awarded to all members of the plan as of January 1st, 2023. Some of this information I'm giving is repetitive of Eve's presentation, but it is an important topic to us, so I felt it was important to continue with this. Two factors determine if a cost of living adjustment can be awarded to members. the surplus available, and what portion of the surplus can be spent on a cost of living adjustment while still preserving the long-term sustainability of the plan for current and future members. This is defined in the plan's funding policy. In reviewing the plan's financial position against the requirements of the funding policy, we determined that a cost of living adjustment of 5.24% could be awarded, representing, as previously discussed, 94% of the Canadian Consumer Price Index of 5.56% for the same period. The portion that was not awarded this year will be carried over into the future and awarded to members when the plan is in a position to do so. It is a positive outcome to be able to award a cost of living adjustment nearly equal to the increase in the Consumer Price Index during this period of historically high inflation, while still protecting the plan long term. In addition, our plan does not have a cap on the cost of living adjustment, which many other plans do. The predecessor plan of the NBPSPP, for example, the PSSA, had a cap of 5%. Joining us now is John Sinclair, President and CEO of Vestcor, the plan's investment manager and administrative services provider. John will provide us with a summary of the plan's 2021 results and an update for 2022. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Kathy, and good afternoon, plan members and stakeholders. It is my pleasure to provide an update with respect to the investment management and pension administration program provided to your plan by Vestcor. To start off, I thought it might be helpful to, again, just remind you who Vestcor is. We are a not-for-profit entity that partners with your pension plan to be able to provide cost-effective investment management and pension administration services. We provide detailed, externally audited financial statements and annual reports on our website, vestcor.org, if you're looking for more information. Vestcor is governed by an independent board of directors that are expert in a number of different skills required to govern an entity such as Vestcor. And we're regulated and supervised by the Financial and Consumer Services Commission of New Brunswick as both an investment fund manager and a portfolio manager. Vestcor is owned equally by your public service pension plan and the teacher's pension plan. But that being said, we do have a number of other clients that we provide services to. And these cost efficiencies through economies of scale benefit all of the various members that we provide services to. As shown in this slide, you can see that the public service plan is the largest of our clients, with about 45% of the assets under management, which ended as a total for Vestcor at the end of 2021 at $21 billion in assets under management. And we manage about 40% of the members, almost 42,000 of the 106,000 members that we provide services to. So I'll start off with respect to providing some information with respect to our administration services that we provided in 2021. Just to remind you, what our administration team does for you is contained in this slide. So, for example, we provide the pension administration with respect to receiving the contributions from employers and employees and setting up pensions when the time comes and making sure that they're paid on a timely basis. That's our pension administration team. Our member services team provides support to members through emails, through text messages and phone calls, and also through in-person meetings when it's determined that that's necessary. We also, from time to time, provide supplemental services with respect to education to various employer groups as well. Our board support services team helps your trustees facilitate the various requirements that they have with respect to governing your pension plan and providing reporting activities to various groups such as yourself and the Superintendent of Pensions for the province. And last but not least is our communications team, who's been very much involved with setting up this event today. putting together your pension plan's annual report, and newsletters from time to time. In addition, providing information in a timely fashion on the website that is set up for your plan. So from a plan administration perspective in 2021, we were very pleased to be able to continue to have a low cost per member based on a number of peer groups that we benchmark ourselves and engage with across the country. As you can see here, the cost per member for the administration services of your plan was $98 in 2021. It was tremendously busy during the year, and as pointed out here, we had a significant increase in member transactions and service volumes. As you probably know, there has been a tremendous amount of change in the labor market with people either looking to retire earlier or changing employers. And all of those types of activities do create an actual service item that our team has to address with respect to making changes for the various members' statuses, depending on what activity they actually deploy. That being said, however, we're very pleased that our overall satisfaction scores remain very high. For those of you who have actually received a service offering from our member services team, you would have received a request to provide a survey and some feedback with respect to how that service was delivered to you. And as pointed out here, we've received over 94% with a very high satisfaction rate on those services that were provided. And last but not least, we continue, if you've been part of a couple of the past annual information meetings, we would have advised you of some work we were doing with respect to modernizing our pension administration system and such, and those activities have continued and were mainly concluded during 2021 as well. So let's take a look at the investment management services that Vescor provides, and that can be outlined in a couple of various methods as shown here. First of all, we help advise your trustees with respect to determining what investment policy would be best set up to be able to meet the requirements of your plan, providing long-term returns that make sure that your plan is secure, affordable, and sustainable over that long-term period, and to be able to provide a lower risk, as has been referred to earlier. Both Kathy referred to how typically the investment strategies that your plan has perform better relative to other types of pension plans in down market environments, and to be able to do that, provide a slightly lower return in strong investment market environments. And as well as Eve pointed out, there are a number of risk management tests that need to be met with respect to the annual filings that take place with the Superintendent of Pensions, and that as well creates a need for a special investment policy that again leads one to less risk. Eve as well referred to the actuarial target discount rate of 4.5%. That is required to make sure that the plan remains healthy. And so, of course, developing the investment policy is very much focused on achieving that return over the longer term. And in doing that, in setting out the investment policy, there are a number of other industry standard benchmarks that are provided to measure our active investment management against. So looking at 2021, and this information will be provided, I believe, very shortly through an updated newsletter that will be distributed to all plan members. But it's been referred to earlier, and I think, again, Eve had mentioned it, 2021 was a very strong year from an investment performance perspective. The total portfolio return, as shown here on the left-hand side of the chart, was 9.23%. And as shown against the dashed horizontal line, that's the targeted discount rate of 4.5%. Obviously, that return was very strong vis-a-vis that objective. What's more important, though, is how the returns have performed over the longer term. And as you can see here, whether it's a 4-year period, or since the plan was originally converted back in January of 2014, or even back to when the New Brunswick Investment Management Corporation provided investment management services to the pre-converted plan, the Public Service Superannuation Act, you can see that the returns on an annualized basis have been far in excess of that 4.5%. So certainly the plan has been able to generate those returns necessary, not just in 2021, but over the longer term. The other thing to point out here is that the active management, the management that our investment professionals have done above and beyond your investment policy benchmarks, was also tremendously strong during 2021, adding slightly over 2% of additional returns. And that 2% against the assets under management for the public service pension plan results in about $180 million of additional value that was created to and earned for the plan in question. The other piece that we've talked about over time is, as well, not just the return that's required, but the low-risk nature of the pension plan. So one of the things that we do to ensure that we are actually being low risk is, first of all, having to meet those risk management tests that Eve referred to earlier. But we also like to look at how the plan has done versus other types of pension plans across the country. And to do this, we have access to a survey that's provided by RBC Investor and Treasury Services, who survey a number of defined benefit pension plans across the country. And they look at the returns and the risk performance of these plans over a 4-year period. So again, the longer term time period that's important with respect to funding the plan. So in this chart, you can see on the return side, the returns are on the y-axis, and the risk or variability is on the x-axis. And one of the things we want to ensure is that the performance of your plan over time is in the lower risk quadrant. And in fact, as you can see here, it is with respect to an annualized risk statistic of 6.45% versus a median plan statistic of 8.72%. You can also see that there were only, the red dot here is actually your investment policy. So excluding that observation, you can see there are only 3 other pension plans that had lower risk of this survey set than your own plan, and each of those actually had a lower return. The other observation we would make, which isn't critical because, again, what's important from a performance perspective is how well are we doing versus the funding requirement of the plan. But that being said, if we look at the performance versus this sample set, you can see that as well, not only are we lower risk, but we've also are very close to the actual median return for that sample set. So we're not giving up over the longer term any additional return to be able to create that lower risk type profile. The other caveat to just point out in this slide is that these are gross returns. They don't include investment management fees. And as I'll show you on a following slide, actually our very low risk or very low expense ratio would actually put us in actually even a better comparison situation versus some of these other plans if we were able to actually see what their expenses were and incorporate them in our analysis. So as I mentioned, Vestcourt is a very cost-effective investment management organization. And for 2021, our investment management expense ratio was 14 basis points or 0.14%, which is pointed out here is significantly lower than the median Canadian pension plans that are surveyed with respect to particularly public service type pension plans, and up to 0.5% more cost-effective than pure for-profit investment management alternatives. And that's important because over the life of a pension plan, fee savings do accrue up to be a significant amount of value that's left when somebody goes to retire. But also one of the other ways that we look at this is if you look at those savings anywhere from 0.2% to 0.5% in a year against assets of about $9.4 billion, that's a significant savings just from a cost perspective of anywhere from $20 to $51 million of additional value that was saved within your plan. Another way to look at that is $51 million would work out to about 1,700 public sector pensions that were paid in 2021. So very material with respect to the contribution of those cost savings. And to wrap up my section, as was mentioned already, and as I'm sure you're aware, 2022 has been quite a challenging environment from an investment perspective, year-to-date, June 30th. Eve discussed in quite some detail the challenges of inflation both globally and within Canada, and that has caused both fixed income markets to react negatively and equity markets as well. So it's been a very challenging period with respect to investment returns. That being said, however, as we've mentioned in the past and mentioned here this afternoon, Our plan is designed to do much better than a typical pension plan in a down market type environment. And so as shown here, you can see that as of June 30th, and again, I think it was referred to earlier, the plan has incurred a negative return of 7.9%. But compared to the traditional median defined benefit pension plan, as surveyed by RBC in that chart I showed you earlier, those plans are down almost 15%. So you can see a significant difference in terms of the performance of your plan during this environment. Over the more important longer term, the 4-year returns of almost 4.6% for your plan is significantly ahead again of that median defined benefit pension plan of 2.97%. And more importantly, over even longer term, you can see that since the plan was converted, as of June 30th, the annualized return is 6.4%. Again, much better than the typical median defined benefit pension plan, but more importantly, much better still than that 4.5% discount rate that was mentioned earlier. On the administration side of things, it remains busy, as again, labor markets haven't totally corrected with respect to retirees and people switching jobs. But that being said, the key performance indicators of our administration team remain strong and in excess of our targets. And as well, the member services scores we've received so far year to date remain strong as well, which helps validate how we've done with respect to providing that level of service. So similar to Eve, I will be here to answer any questions, and if anything comes up after the meeting that you may think about as well, I believe there'll be an email address shared with you where you can submit some questions, and we'll get back to you with answers in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for your informative update. That completes our formal presentation for today. We are now going to move on to our question and answer period. I'm very pleased to welcome fellow trustee Susie Prudeg to moderate this period for us. Welcome, Susie.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis heureuse
I'm really happy to be with you today, and as Kathy mentioned, my name is Susie Prudeg, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees.
Board of Trustees or guests who have presented here today, please submit your questions to us by clicking on the Ask a Question button that appears on your screen. I would ask, however, that if you have questions specific to your own pension, we encourage you to contact our plan's member services team, a service provided by VESCOR. In addition, members have submitted several questions online prior to today's meeting, and we will answer as many as possible. All the questions that we're unable to answer during the meeting today will be answered and summarized through a question and answer document made available to all members on the website in the coming weeks. The website is NBPSPP.ca. So on to the questions. My first question here is the increase to the cost of living is not on par with the increase in inflation. It was much higher than what was being provided. When can we expect a fair increase? Kathy, and maybe Eve, you could add after.
Thank you for the question. The cost of living adjustment is in line with the long-term cost of living increase calculated using the Canadian Consumer Price Index. Inflation is often referenced as an annual increase from January to December, but in case of the NBPSPP, calculation of COLA, the change in inflation, is determined based on the increase in the average of the Consumer Price Index for the 12-month period of July 2021 to June 2022, relative to the same average on the preceding June 2021. That is why a different calculation period sometimes seems as though it doesn't match the longer-term inflation. This calculation is outlined in the NBPSPP funding policy. Over the longer term, it is expected that these differences will even out. Examples of the calculations are available on our website under Cost of Living Adjustments, and that is NBPSPP.ca, Cost of Living Adjustments. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Eve, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Certainly. Thanks, Susie. I do want to remind people that this year's inflation is something that we haven't seen for the last almost 4 decades, 39 years. I think the last time we saw inflation for an annual average at the level that we've seen this year was in 1983. And so, therefore, I think it is prudent for the plan to try to bite these spikes in inflation in bite size that the plan can afford to bite, and therefore to make sure that your base pension continues to be protected as well. And so that's what the plan is doing. As I mentioned in my presentation, there is provisions for recapture of the amount that has not been credited this year in a future year as inflation will subside at some point in the future. And we hope, and we're very confident actually, that the Bank of Canada will be able to do its work and fight inflation such that it will come back to a more normal level in the foreseeable future. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Eve. Thanks, Kathy. Next question. How are incentives still paid out to employees of VESCOR if a full cost of living adjustment could not be provided to retirees? Kathy?
Thank you once again for the question. Cost of living adjustments, as mentioned earlier, are awarded if the financial health of the plan allows us to do so. This is determined by, as you saw today, the actuarial valuation report and also the plan's funding policy. Investment performance obviously contributes to the plan, but is not the only factor that determines whether COLA can be awarded. Therefore, the plan's cost of living adjustment and VESCOR's employee incentive plan are not necessarily correlated. That said, it's important for you to understand that the plan regularly assesses the performance of VESCOR, much like any other external investment manager. The NBPSPP is pleased with VESCOR's long-term investment performance, which continues to significantly outperform our investment policy benchmarks while providing very cost-effective fees. As outlined in today's presentation, the fees VESCOR charges the NBPSPP are significantly lower than if we worked with another service provider. VESCOR has a professional board of directors that governs their compensation program and ensures it is in line with industry best practices. VESCOR discloses a significant amount of detail in their annual report and on their website about the compensation program. Thank you.
Eve, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? No? All right, thanks. Here's a long one. When it comes to the wide-ranging and severe impacts like sea level rising, flooding, wildfires, and disrupted food chain supply, the climate crisis presents an existential threat. Concerns for the future of the human race should outweigh any others when it comes to pension fund investment activity. Pension funds should not be bankrolling climate crisis contributors. For example, the New York City Pension Fund announced a divestment of $3 billion in late 2021. What is the board doing to ensure that the pension fund investments do not contribute to the climate emergency through continued investment in fossil fuels? And what are the plans for divestment? And if there are no plans for divestment, why not? Eve, maybe you can take this one. Or John? Oh, Kathy, okay, sorry.
That's fine. The question was for our board, so I guess I'm appropriate to try to answer this one. It was a long question, but I'm happy to answer it. This topic of environmental, or ESG, is top of mind for us as a board, and is actually one of the strategic plan initiatives we have prioritized in the board's strategic plan. We are regularly seeking further education on environmental considerations in investment and management of funds, and we're actually developing an ESG, environmental, social, and governance policy specific to this plan. Environmental risks are also covered in our board's enterprise risk management framework. We've also discussed this with our investment manager, Vescor, and we understand that Vescor is active in this area as well. So perhaps, John, you could add to that. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Kathy. Vescor has had a set of responsible investment guidelines that we publicly disclosed back in 2019 and were recently updated as recent as the first quarter of this year. And those guidelines outline how we integrate environmental, social, and governance, or ESG considerations, into our own investment management activities. We as well are in the process of concluding our first responsible investment report, which will provide a report as to how we are proceeding vis-a-vis meeting goals of that set of guidelines. And that will include, for the first time, publication of carbon emissions with respect to the overall portfolio that we manage, in line with TCFD, or the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, best practice guidelines. We look forward to working with our clients, such as the PSPP board, with respect to sharing that information and helping use that ability and tool that we have to help them set out what goals and objectives they have with respect to potentially meeting the global climate carbon emission guideline reductions between now and the 2050 goal period that's been set out.
All right, thanks, John. For active employees, how will the enhanced CPP that is rolling out in January 2024 affect the increased pension deductions that normally occurs when the first tier YMP is reached for CPP? Will we be expected to pay increased pension contributions while still paying into second tier YMP CPP? And is the pension board reviewing that practice, and are there any plans of change? That one's for Yves.
Thanks, Susie. I'll take that one. So as many of you know, the Canada Pension Plan is being improved over time. It started a while ago, and it's continuing. And next year there will be increases in contributions, or in 2024, increases in contributions related on a portion of salary for which the CPP did not levy contributions in the past. So those extra contributions that you will be paying to the Canada Pension Plan will actually result over time in extra benefits provided by the Canada Pension Plan for the members. The public service pension plan for these enhanced benefits is not linked at all to the Canada Pension Plan, and so you're going to pay more to the Canada Pension Plan and receive more from the Canada Pension Plan. The contributions for the public service pension plan are not going to be affected at all by these contributions, so you will pay the same amount of contributions to the same level of the YMP that you used to pay in the past, and you will get benefits based on those contributions from the public service pension plan as well. So the improvements to CPP are completely unlinked and unrelated to the public service pension plan.
All right, thanks, Yves. I have another one for you here. What about our current retirement age and penalties? Are we doing anything to improve on that so that people can retire at a reasonable age without huge penalties?
I guess first I'll provide a bit of context. I don't like personally the word penalty. Those are reduction for early retirement, and the reason why those are there is to ensure there's equity among members between those who are retiring at their normal retirement age, which is age 65 in the plan, and those who wish to retire early under the plan. So the reductions are not a penalty. They're there to ensure that the value received by the members who decide to retire at 65 and those who decide to retire earlier are similar, and so that the pension plan pays about the similar amount of pension. So if you retire earlier, you will get your pension for a longer period, and therefore it is reasonable to expect that you will receive a slightly lower pension if you decide to retire early to compensate for that. And it's a question of equity between members. Now, is it a priority to try to change that? At this point in time, the priorities for benefit changes and improvements are found in the funding policy. So the Board of Trustees' first priority, as outlined in the funding policy, is to provide COLA, and we've talked about that at length during that meeting. And so that, under the funding policy, is really the benefit that the Board of Trustees is concentrating on at this point in time. There is potentially, if the plan becomes very well funded, and we're talking about ratios here above 140%, an ability for a review of the benefits and its competitiveness against other public service plan. And at that time, if when we get there, this becomes is still an issue, then that at that time the Board of Trustees could potentially look into it. But certainly in terms of priority at this time, I would say cost of living adjustment is the first priority.
All right, thank you, Yves. John, I have one for you here. Your responsible investment guidelines include transparency as a core principle. Can you tell me how much the PSPP invests in fossil fuels?
So currently we can't tell you exactly how much we invest in fossil fuels, and that's because it's a very difficult calculation to actually conduct. As you probably can appreciate, there are many different companies that we might invest in that possibly have some sort of tie in their business that's fossil fuel related, but don't necessarily break that out. So to do some sort of comprehensive calculation, that's very difficult to do. That being said, however, thinking back to my answer with respect to the earlier question, the updated report that we will soon release, which will provide a measure of the actual carbon distribution from our portfolio, I think will lead us to a very similar type end result that maybe the person asking the question is thinking about. And we'll be able to monitor what that carbon exposure looks like over time with respect to how well the various companies we're investing in are working towards meeting the various targets that they themselves are setting out for themselves. So we don't have a measure. It's difficult to come up with a raw measure as the question's posed, but I think the tools that we have in place that, again, we'll be releasing very shortly will help us in terms of providing that type of result.
Okay, thanks, John. Next question. How sustainable is the pension plan in the long term, given that inactive membership is likely to surpass active membership in the near future, as there will be more people collecting a pension rather than contributing to it at that point? Maybe Yves, if you could take this one.
Yes, thanks a lot for the question, Susie. Our actuarial valuations actually take into account in our extrapolations over the next 20 years this dynamic of demographic shift in the pension plan. And although it is true that over the long term, as your retirees will start to exceed your active members, that the plan becomes maybe a little bit more risky. We are already aware of that. We know that that is happening. We know basically when it's going to happen. It's a continuing process. So in the long term, the plan is ready to face that because it's already something that we plan for, given that those are demographics that over the next 20 years we know exactly how, or not exactly, but we know very well how it's going to play out. The investments today and the calculations that we do today about the risk already include that process happening.
All right, thanks. So here's the final question. What happens to the contributions from a member who does not have a spouse but has children who are their beneficiaries if the member dies prior to or after their retirement? John, if you want to take this one.
I guess it depends on what actual benefit they've actually selected with respect to when they invoke their retirement. And certainly our member services team would be able to provide much more information on the specific circumstance that the member might have that would be more accurate than that at this point in time.
All right, thanks. There are a number of great additional questions that are coming in at this moment, but we had committed to an hour, and I know that people are taking this meeting during their lunch breaks, many of you anyway, so we want to respect the time frame. We will touch base directly with those who have submitted questions, and we will share the answers on our website in the coming weeks. For any questions specific to your situation, please remember that you can contact the member services team at Vestcor at any time. Nous allons maintenant conclure notre séance.
We'll now conclude our question and answer period. Please note that if you do have questions with regards to something else in the future and you couldn't ask your question today, you can always do it by email or by phone.
Will be summarized and posted online on the website at the NBPSPP.ca in the coming weeks. In addition, a copy of the recording of today's meeting will be made available on the plan's website in coming days as well. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, thank you for having joined us today, and this concludes our annual information meeting. Thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful day.